Recording started.
Hello, and welcome to this webinar on supporting curriculum implementation for Stage 1 of Implementation Launch. I'm Fox Nemoisey, and I'm joined by Misty Higgins, and we are professional learning coordinators in the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Kentucky Department of Education. So in terms of a purpose for this webinar, we have two objectives: deepen understanding of the purpose of launch and its key responsibilities, and then provide recommendations from the field to support districts in effective launch of a high-quality instructional resource, HQIR. The Strengthening Tier 1 Instruction from Vision Impact figure from the curriculum-based professional learning guidance document will offer us a through line during this three-part webinar series. It takes the movement of curriculum adoption and implementation from co-creating a common instructional vision for teaching and learning in a content area to the impacts that vision would ultimately intend: high-quality instruction across classrooms, improve student experience, and improve student outcomes. We will focus on the grade spaces in the middle, elements 2 and 3 in particular, that we often refer to as the bridge work from vision to impact. In order to have the full access to strong local curriculum in HQIR, element 2 needed to then impact the quality of instruction, the student experience, and student outcomes at scale, there must be effective implementation and high quality professional learning, element 3. We have three foundational resources we want to highlight that can help secure an effective implementation process. So phase 4 of the curriculum development process with its associated tools for year-over-year goal setting, planning, and monitoring. The curriculum implementation framework to support planning and reflection. And then the CBPL, the curriculum-based professional learning guidance document to support planning for and providing curriculum-based professional learning. These resources are available on the kystandards.org site under the Model Curriculum Framework. So this graphic on the slide, which we adapted from Rivet Education, shows the stages of implementation we refer to in our resources. Each stage is set with reference to the years of implementation, beginning with adoption, which is also referred to at times as year 0. In this webinar, we will focus on launch. And launch typically begins in the spring of the adoption year, of that year 0, once the first 3 stages of the curriculum development process have been worked through and the district has adopted its HQIR. We will speak at a high level to the primary aims of launch on an upcoming slide. One additional note here, however, would be that the blue cycling arrow beside launch signifies the need to have an onboarding version of launch available each year to support staff new to the district and/or to the grade level. So this is a screenshot from the Curriculum Implementation Framework, a tool intended to provide a detailed roadmap of key responsibilities broken down by role group for each of the 3 stages of implementation. In this series, we will select certain responsibilities to elaborate on, providing some findings from the field to support engaging them most effectively. Returning now to the primary aims of launch as listed in the stage description of the framework, they are to develop an overall understanding of the curriculum in HQIR, and this would include its unique instructional model and design principles, and then leaders developing the system, structures, and policies that will support effective implementation. And you might add to these the obvious need for just a general orientation to the HQIR, what's included with it, and how to find everything.
So focusing now on the first major group of responsibilities associated with ensuring HQIR readiness, we see that it includes determining a pacing window and communicating non-negotiables related to use of the HQIR. So based on experiences and lessons learned, we would recommend that part of the expectation around HQIR usage is that it should be used for the majority of classroom instruction and to implement as designed during early implementation. This allows educators to deepen their understanding of the HQIR, its instructional design, and the arc of learning. So really just understanding what makes the resource high quality. The better educators understand their resource as designed, the more equipped they are to make smart adjustments in later years of implementation in a way that maintains resource integrity. When setting a local pacing window, it is important to consult with the vendor to take into consideration pacing issues that typically arise in early use of the resource. The vendor should also be able to provide support in how to help teachers stay within that window. So, for example, helping educators to understand the most critical aspects of a unit or lesson that cannot be skipped to ensure instructional coherence and to support students in reaching the intended learning outcomes. The second group of key responsibilities under launch focus on creating the enabling conditions for effective implementation. So, some of the recommendations that we would offer are to spend time examining local policies, structures, and procedures to see how well they support effective implementation, those that might actually be a barrier or where there may not yet be something in place. A few that we have seen especially important to examine include master schedules to ensure that there's enough time to implement the HQIR as recommended, lesson planning policies and what may need to change to better align with the work of intellectual preparation, and those associated with grading and reporting. It's also important to identify the shifts in leadership roles and responsibilities and to build a shared understanding of those shifts and expectations with your district and school leaders. When determining the tool that will be used to provide feedback, make sure to select one that is specifically designed for HQIR usage and the instructional shifts embedded in our standards and the HQIR. The KDE has created the Instructional Practice Guide, or what we call the IPG for short, and it's specifically for this purpose, and versions are available for math, reading and writing, and science. Because effective HQIR implementation may require shifts in practice for educators at all levels of the system, districts need to establish feedback mechanisms from the start to help manage questions, concerns, and attitudes. This may be in the form of surveys for different role groups given at strategic points throughout the year, or hosting focus groups that represent the various roles and perspectives across the district. As a part of effective implementation, leaders need to work with the HQIR or the HQPL vendor to provide a launch training that helps create a shared understanding and a common language regarding the HQIR's instructional approach. In terms of recommendations, it's critically important to work collaboratively with the vendor to ensure that the launch training addresses aspects such as understanding the HQIR's instructional design principles and the arc of learning, and then how those design principles align with the district's instructional vision, which should take into account your local context, the Kentucky academic standards, and current research for teaching and learning in the content area. The training should also help educators understand how the academic standards are embedded in the HQIR. So, for example, how a unit may address multiple standards that are bundled together around a compelling question, big idea, or an anchoring phenomenon. Educators also need to understand how learning is assessed within the resource, both formatively and summatively, and how assessment progresses. This includes understanding which standards are assessed in which units and how some standards may be assessed in multiple units as students grow more in depth over time or for repeated exposure and application. This also includes understanding the types and the format of assessments that's going to be used to monitor student learning. Part of what makes an HQIR high quality is the inclusion of evidence-based practices and instructional routines to support student learning. The launch training should help educators to see which practices and routines are consistently embedded throughout the resource and how those support teaching and learning. And then finally, educators should walk away from the launch training with an understanding of what strong implementation looks like, whether that's from videos that show actual classroom instruction with the resource or allowing educators in the launch training to experience lessons as learners. Continuing with the focus on launch training recommendations, we want to share just a few additional considerations. To make sure that the launch training addresses the key aspects we just talked about on that previous slide, it may be helpful to designate a district person to coordinate directly with the facilitator from the HQIR or HQPL vendor. So, for example, this might include scheduling meetings to discuss expectations for the training up front, and then reviewing agendas and slide decks to provide feedback to ensure alignment to your expectations. It's also important for the district and school leaders to engage in that launch PL right alongside their staff. It helps to increase their own understanding of the resource, what they are going to be looking for during classroom observations, as well as identifying potential needs for professional learning throughout the year. Also, be sure to include all relevant staff in the launch training, not just regular classroom teachers. This might include other support staff like interventionists and special education staff. As we begin to wrap up, just a few final recommendations. In addition to effective launch training, educators need ongoing professional learning support throughout the year. So to help with this, leaders should identify blocks of time in the current calendar to help create space for curriculum-based professional learning and shared learning directly related to the use of the HQIR. PLC's professional learning communities are one of the primary vehicles for providing ongoing job-embedded CBPL. So during the launch stage, leaders need to ensure that structures for PLCs are in place and that the time is protected and used for intellectual preparation. And so directly connected to that, leaders also need to establish a shared understanding of intellectual preparation with staff during launch, beginning with unit internalization. Educators should then be given an opportunity to internalize their first unit prior to the start of the school year. An effective launch training, along with internalizing the first unit of instruction, it really enables educators to feel more confident in implementing the HQIR from the very start. So thank you for taking time to watch this video, and please reach out with any questions that you might have.